G'day, good evening. Welcome to another week here at Paul Murray Live. We're back in the man cave and ready to fire up as always here on a Sunday night. Now, if you lived in certain parts of the country, you know it was bloody hot. You also know who your true friends are. Because if you have a mate who owned a pool and they did not invite you over, there's problems. As you know, the bushfire season will come every single year. Fingers crossed it will not be as bad as the one that happened last year. But already, on sweltering days in Sydney and in South Australia, where the temperature has been close to and over 40 degrees, depending on which part of the country that you are currently in, there were bushfires today. Thankfully, ones that didn't take property, did not take lives. But as we all learnt last year, literally, when fires merge, they can, of course, kill and take oh so much with them. But I wanted to ask this question while we had a little lull in proceedings, when the politics was not as loud. But our summer is going to be beating down on us with inevitability. December just a couple of days away, and fires will, of course, be part of this summer. Are we ready? There are all of the inquiries and all of the promises and extra money and all the rest of it. But there are some worrying signs that, despite the talk, we may not be able to deal with what happened last year. Yes, there have been some improvements, particularly with greater commitments to hazard reduction, but we don't know how much of that hazard reduction has actually been done to this point. But what we do know is that there are still some pretty serious concerns for the men and women who will volunteer hundreds of hours of their time. Tens of thousands of these people will put their summers aside. It could be for a couple of days, but it could also be for weeks and weeks on end. Right now in Victoria, despite the fact that they had record spending in that budget, and they're going to go into debt to billions of dollars, according to the Country Fire Authority, there's not enough money being spent right now to replace very old equipment. This was a problem in Victoria during the past fire season. This was a problem in places like the ACT. Now, yes, we rent an awful lot of overseas, particularly aircraft, and it makes us think that we are right at the edge of 21st century abilities to take on fires. But again, the truth is that there will be trucks that are too old, with equipment that is too old, with fire hoses that are too old, if every single appliance, which is what they call them, is needed this summer as it was last summer. Now, this matters. I speak, of course, of the ACT, which, yes, has a small firefighting service, but it's one that, as we have seen from about a decade ago, if something flares up, it can take rows and rows of houses and kill people with it. A small microcosm, something that they should be able to get on top of. The firefighting force is not that big there, so you would think that if there are problems, you're able to get on top of things. Well, guess what the issues were in the ACT? The equipment was too old. Some of the trucks were too old. Some of the gear didn't work. Now, some of the concerns that have come up from those that are not really the official story that you hear, from those that are the volunteer fire services, and sometimes there are the firefighting unions that, of course, take in many of the professional firefighters, and then there are the volunteer ones, but then there are smaller volunteer firefighter associations in all of our states and territories. They don't get the same type of media attention that the big ones do. Well, they are sounding an alarm bell right now, again, in the ACT. Their concern is that there is not enough equipment and conditions to respect their knowledge. Also, apparently, we're not getting enough of that pink foam that we saw work so successfully in earlier parts of the bushfire season last year. So this week on the show, we're going to do everything we can to try to work out, not the spin, but the reality of how ready are we for another potentially devastating bushfire season. Now, like you, I hope we have the most boring summer ever. 2020 is a year that has put us all through the ringer, and we all deserve a break, including those who deserve to have a break from fighting fires all the way around the country. But there are some worrying signs. We'll delve into all of those this week, while, yes, covering all of the other things that you've come to know, love and expect from the show. But we are not putting the queue in the rack. We are not going to take the final few weeks of 2020 to put our feet on the desk and to give you happy talk. We'll tell you what's really going on, including in the people who you may rely upon to save your property or a family member's property. I give you that promise.